Perhaps today we would struggle to recall the name of Edward VIII, just another British monarch among many. One more crowned figure whose name gathers dust in textbooks. We would simply pass by his brass-plated label in a museum case. But Edward VIII did what kings are not meant to do by the nature of their birth. He chose not the crown, but Wallis Simpson. He chose love. And perhaps this is his true, unmanufactured immortality, not one granted by historians. From the Anglo-Saxon period onward, he became the only monarch to voluntarily relinquish the throne, a king for less than a year. His romance with a divorced American woman named Wallis Simpson began in 1934, 2 years before the death of King George V, Edward's father. Wallis Simpson and her second husband, Ernest, moved from America to London in the late 1920s, gradually building the right connections and social ties. And on January 10, 1931, one of these connections would change their lives forever. And, indeed, alter the fate of the entire British Empire. So, who was Wallis Simpson, really? A predatory adventuress? A calculating coquette? Or, on the contrary, a tragic pawn? The perfect instrument to remove an inconvenient king? Or perhaps Wallis was simply the emotional anchor of a Prince of Wales who never truly grew up, a role she stepped into almost by instinct, even as she was accused of craving a crown? Despite countless films, books, open archives, and even the couple's own memoirs, we remain far from the truth. And we may never learn it. Key documents about their brief reign and long, complicated life will not be unsealed until 2044. Wallis Simpson, born Bessie Wallace Warfield, came into the world on June 19, 1896, in the resort town of Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania. The fact that she lacked a birth certificate, a newspaper announcement, or any official record of her arrival would later play against her, feeding slander and tabloid imagination. Yet even in the Windsor Chronicles, one can find abundant references confirming the old and respected lineage of the Warfield family, and even distant ties to the royal house. The roots of the Warfields, her father's family, run astonishingly deep. Their branches reach back to Norman England. They lived in medieval castles, fought as valiant warriors, advised kings, and later crossed the Atlantic to help shape the New World. Her mother's family, the Montagues, had an equally distinguished past. Both the Warfields and the Montagues supported the Confederacy during the American Civil War, a sign of their status, influence, and firmly rooted traditions. Simply put, the genealogical tree of Wallis Simpson is far broader than that of, say, the Kent or Gloucester princesses, a fact easily confirmed by authoritative genealogical sources. Links will be provided in the description. Wallis never knew her father, a successful grain merchant who died of tuberculosis at 30, when she was only 5 months old. She was named in his honor. And her childhood was far more secure and privileged than her detractors later liked to claim. She was raised in Baltimore by a devoted mother, a strict aristocratic grandmother, and her uncle Solomon, Saul Warfield, a wealthy, influential businessman who effectively became her patron. She studied at Oldfields, the most prestigious and expensive girls' school in Maryland. Her classmates remembered her as a brilliant, bold, irresistibly charming young woman who knew how to command attention from both her peers and the adults around her. Intelligence, discipline, a cool elegance, and an uncanny ability to get her way soon became the hallmarks of young Wallis. It was she who came up with the idea to dress in men's clothing and sneak into an exclusive gentlemen's club in Baltimore. Together with the governor's daughter, they managed to slip inside, but a sharp-eyed bartender spotted the imposters and promptly showed them the door. By the next morning, the local papers were buzzing about the scandal. And it was precisely this blend of courage, charisma, and theatrical flair that would later turn her into a figure of global fascination. Soon, fate would grant her a stage beyond anything she could have imagined. Right after finishing school, Wallis moved to live with her cousin in Pensacola, Florida, where she fell in love and married a naval aviator, Earl Winfield Spencer Jr., known as Win. Their life was a chain of constant relocations. Win drank heavily and was often harsh. According to his sister, Wallis flirted almost instinctively. It was simply part of her nature. The couple's inability to have children hastened the collapse of their marriage. Keeping the marriage only on paper, for appearance's sake, they lived apart. By the age of 25, Wallis had already tasted freedom, and the world opened before her with countless possibilities. Biographers describe this chapter of Wallis's life as a constant whirl of parties, dinners, and romantic entanglements. She had several high-profile affairs, including one with an Argentine diplomat who would later marry into Mussolini's family. Her Shanghai years, what she herself would later call her bachelor days and lotus year, became the stuff of legend. Gossip had it that it was there she learned the oriental arts of love, the very skills they claimed that allowed her to captivate men so effortlessly. What is certain is this: in Shanghai, she polished her social instincts, perfected her impeccable manners, and built a circle of acquaintances who would remain loyal for decades. She learned to move through fashionable society with ease, appearing wherever she wished and charming whomever she met. By the age of 30, Wallis decided it was time to return home and to marry again. She began seeing Ernest Aldrich Simpson, a Harvard-educated, comfortably wealthy shipping executive and, at the time, a happily married man. For Wallis, he divorced his wife, and the newly formed couple moved to London to start anew. There, thanks to Mr. Simpson's British father, Wallis was quickly introduced into the upper tiers of London society. Wallis dazzled in this world. She had an exceptional talent for entertaining. If she wanted a party in shades of pink, the table would be set with crabs and watermelons. The dishes matched the menu, and everything, from invitations and flowers to table decor, followed a single artistic plan. She believed there were only two kinds of dinner parties, those built around games and those built around conversation, and that they should never, under any circumstances, be mixed. Mrs. Simpson made cocktails herself, another undeniable talent. But no matter how perfect the menu or the drinks were, it was the conversation that made her evenings unforgettable. Politics, books, art, sport, theater, or the latest news. Wallis was not only a gifted storyteller, she was also an attentive listener. She kept a meticulous record of her most valuable contacts: diplomats, embassy officials, fashionable hostesses, and celebrated actresses. And in January 1931, their friend Thelma Furness, then the mistress of the future king, introduced Wallis Simpson and her husband to the Prince of Wales at her country estate. Their conversation began with the Prince of Wales's usual comment about the British weather, a polite ritual he had repeated hundreds of times. But Wallis, sharp-tongued and unafraid, replied without hesitation, "I'm sorry, sir, but you disappoint me. Every American woman hears that question." I had hoped for something more original from the Prince of Wales. Edward, raised on royal etiquette, courtly manners, and carefully measured phrases, was delighted and a little disarmed by such boldness. Over the course of 1931, this light acquaintance grew into a genuine friendship between the prince and the Simpsons. They spent almost every weekend together at the 18th century Royal Lodge, Fort Belvedere, in Windsor Great Park. It was not love at first sight. Their romance began only 3 years later, in 1934. Wallis later recalled, "Once, as she was leaving on yet another trip, Thelma Furness laughed and said, 'I'm afraid he'll be bored. Wallis, will you look after him?' We already know the result. It became a diversion not only for the king, but for the entire British Empire. Overall, the Prince of Wales had a particular fondness for beautiful American women, especially those descended from marriages between English aristocrats and wealthy American heiresses. As the couple grew closer, Edward lavishly gifted Wallis with jewelry, couture clothing, and other luxuries. He openly invited her to travel across Europe. At Edward's insistence, Wallis, wearing a tiara borrowed from Cartier, was formally presented to his parents, King George V and Queen Mary. The meeting, during which only a few words were exchanged, was far from successful. The king issued a strict order not to receive this woman in his own house, and commanded that Mrs. Simpson be excluded from all forthcoming royal events. According to contemporaries, the Prince of Wales became utterly infatuated with Mrs. Simpson. After the death of his father, King George V, the Prince of Wales was proclaimed King Edward VIII. He informed Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin of his intention to marry Wallis Simpson. Not only the royal family, but also the public and the government could not accept her. In their eyes, she was a commoner, ignorant of aristocratic etiquette, born and raised across the Atlantic, and already twice married. This American woman was deemed entirely unsuitable to be queen, particularly since both of her former husbands were alive and well. In English history, there was already a precedent of a widow becoming queen twice. The story of Catherine Parr, the sixth wife of the famously amorous Henry VIII. But how could one proclaim a new queen when two former husbands were still alive? Another dark side of Wallis Simpson's biography was her alleged connection with the Nazis. The government suspected her of spying for Nazi Germany. Her relationship with the German ambassador to Britain, Joachim von Ribbentrop, was far from purely platonic. It is said that each time he returned to Britain, he sent her 17 symbolic carnations to commemorate the 17 nights they supposedly spent together. Perhaps this is more romantic legend than fact. The king was offered suitable matches, true beauties, and could have married to secure a legitimate heir while keeping Wallis as a mistress. He refused. Theoretically, nothing could have stopped the king from marrying his chosen woman. According to the 18th century Act of Succession, kings were forbidden to marry Catholics, but otherwise, there were no restrictions. Edward VIII could have been crowned and then married. But, being a gentleman and simply an honest man, he declared that he would not undergo the sacred coronation ceremony without revealing the full truth to the country and the world. The next day, he delivered a speech on BBC Radio, including one of its final lines. I find it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king without the help and support of the woman I love. Edward VIII reigned for 325 days and 13 hours. During his abdication, he reportedly slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, threatening to end his life if Wallis left him. His aides described him as nearly unhinged. Biographer Andrew Morton, known for his extensive work on Princess Diana, notes in his book on Wallis Simpson that she was far from delighted by this gesture, reportedly shouting, "You bloody fool." Edward abdicated, and the throne passed to his brother Albert. King George VI became a dutiful, correct, and exemplary monarch whose conduct during the war earned universal respect. Soon after, Wallis finalized her divorce from her second husband, and on June 3, 1937, she married the former king in quiet, understated fashion at the Château de Cannes in France. They assumed the lesser titles of Duke and Duchess of Windsor. The guest list was extremely modest. Only 7 people came from the United Kingdom. To underscore the royal family's disdain for the new Duke and Duchess, the wedding was not even mentioned in the court circular, the daily official bulletin of royal events. As it was her third marriage, Wallis appeared at the altar in pale blue, her favorite color, which beautifully highlighted her eyes. This shade would later become known as Wallis Blue. Her gown, designed by Mainbacher, had long since become a timeless classic, cited as inspiration by brides around the world. Wallis later donated it to the Metropolitan Museum, where it can still be seen today, though the delicate silk has faded, making it hard to recognize. As Duchess of Windsor, Mrs. Simpson created for herself a signature persona, armor. She meticulously prepared for every public appearance. Baroness de Rothschild recalled Wallis Simpson's motto, "Perfection in all things." "A tiara is something I will never have," the Duchess joked to Princess Olga of Yugoslavia. But she more than compensated for the lack of a royal diadem by building her own exquisite collections from Cartier and Van Cleef & Arpels. The public often mistook her jewelry for simplicity. It was hard to believe anyone could own such magnificent stones. The Duke of Windsor spared no expense for his beloved, showering her with jewels. He spent hours working with leading jewelers to create pieces for Wallis's entourage. For these masterpieces, he often incorporated inherited family heirlooms. In his will, he stipulated that the jewelry he had created for the Duchess was never to be sold or worn by another woman. It was meant solely for her, and many pieces bore personal inscriptions. At the very beginning of the war, Edward was attached to the British military mission in France with the rank of Major General, having full access to classified information. In 1940, it was decided to send the inconvenient and potentially dangerous Duke as governor to the Bahamas, far from Europe, Adolf Hitler, and all those espionage scandals. The Windsors set sail for this honorary exile to the Bahamas on August 1st, 1940. Here he is taking the oath of office as governor. The Duke himself did not like to recall this period of his life, while Wallis performed her duties as the governor's wife with grace, pleasure, and flair. From 1940 to 1945, the Duke and Duchess lived in a beautiful paradise, untouched by the hardships of the war. Over the next 3 decades, the couple moved from continent to continent. When they finally settled into their new residence in the northwestern part of the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, they knew they would remain there for the rest of their lives. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor leased this villa from the city until their passing. Legendary designer Stephen Boudin was brought in to work on the interior, blending 2 aristocratic styles, French and English. Classic 18th century panels were combined with the fashionable, contemporary shade known as Wallis Blue, specially created by designers for the Duchess's wedding dress. Remember that? The house also welcomed the famous desk where Edward VIII had penned his abdication letter in 1937, along with a large collection of porcelain. Each room was richly adorned with gold and mirrors, yet never overcrowded with furniture. Wallis herself added countless little objects featuring pugs, beloved by both her and Edward. She adored the scent of lilacs. In winter, fresh bouquets came from the greenhouse, and in spring, from the garden. Every room had its own unique fragrance. To mark the end of the Second World War, Elsa Schiaparelli created the perfume The Sun King in a bottle designed by Salvador Dali. The very first copy was sent to the Duchess of Windsor. Wallis laughed that she had even rearranged Edward's photograph on her dressing table, simply to make room for the exquisite bottle. This mansion hosted Marlene Dietrich, Aristotle Onassis, Elizabeth Taylor, and many other celebrities. In 1990, Mohammed Al-Fayed fully restored the authentic interiors of this famous house, where he himself had once stayed. Spending $12 million, he completely renovated the villa, fixing the leaking roof, peeling wallpaper, and replacing stolen items. After the Duke's death, this little nest had endured hard times. Since the city could not maintain or repair the house as it gradually fell into disrepair, the restoration was a benefit to Paris. Mohammed Al-Fayed was awarded the rank of Officer of the Legion of Honor. The fact that Lady Diana and Dodi, Al-Fayed's son, visited the villa just a few hours before their deaths adds an even more tragic note to the house's history. The Queen Mother, Elizabeth, never forgave Edward for his abdication. She was convinced that the royal duties and the enormous emotional strain had prematurely taken her husband's life. The former king faced numerous accusations, including alleged connections with Nazi intelligence and currency speculation. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor spent 35 challenging yet happy years together. In a major BBC interview in 1970, they expressed no complaints about their fate or grievances against the royal family. In this photograph, among the exquisite interiors, you can see many stylish smoking pipes in the Duke of Windsor's room. His fondness for smoking eventually led to throat cancer. Edward passed away in Paris on May 28, 1972. Edward's niece, Queen Elizabeth II, visited him just once before his death. Whether to view this visit as forgiveness or reconciliation is for you to decide. Wallis lived another 14 years. She could have continued her dazzling previous lifestyle, yet something in her soul seemed to have gone out. She sank into a deep depression, which led her into isolation and unbearable loneliness. In her final years, the only people she interacted with were her secretary, her lawyer, and the nurses pumping her of medications. Later, she developed dementia. By 1980, the Duchess had lost her ability to speak and became bedridden. She passed away on April 24, 1986, in her beloved home in the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, at the age of 89. The Duchess, who had never become a royal highness in life, was accepted into the royal family only after her death. She was buried beside her husband at the Royal Burial Ground at Frogmore in Windsor. In the crypt of St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle rest only monarchs and their heirs. The Duke of Windsor had nothing to do with either the first or the second. During her lifetime, Wallis Simpson was not known for philanthropic activities. However, in gratitude for the support France had given them, the Windsors lived rent and tax-free. The Duchess of Windsor donated her collection of Louis XVI-style furniture, as well as her collection of porcelain and paintings, to the French state that, in addition, £31 million from the sale of jewelry constantly gifted to her by the Duke was donated to the Pasteur Institute. Part of Wallis's estate, valued at £5 million, was also given to the Pasteur Institute's Medical Research Fund as a tribute to France. The royal family, in contrast, received little inheritance. The Duchess of Windsor articulated the morality of the royal court with remarkable clarity and wrote in her memoirs, "A person who never sought to take a place in history will now inevitably take it, a terrible one, carved for me by blind prejudice. I cannot shake the thought that calculated and deliberate efforts are being made to discredit and destroy me." Until the end of her life, she displayed extraordinary inner strength and dignity, ignoring the endless stream of insults and abuse directed at her. The life of the Windsors was a story of love, defiance, and consequence of two people who chose their hearts over crowns and endured a lifetime of scrutiny and scandal. Their story reminds us that courage and passion often come at a price. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel. It's completely free, but it really helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching, and stay with us to discover even more fascinating stories.